comes to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I'm back with another video. This one is going to be called, Is Black Exceptionalism Real? And I'm going to start, as you can see, I'm starting off with the I Have a Dream speech. I think this is something that, even though Martin Luther King had the best intentions at the time, I think probably hurt us more as a people in this country than anything else. I think that when Black people ask themselves, why are we hated so much in this country? Why are we hated so much, really, even in other countries around the world, but particularly right here in America? Despite the fact that we fought in all the wars, despite the fact that we've been responsible for a lot of the modern day technology and appliances that we use on a daily basis, a lot of things that were invented would not have been invented had it not been for Black people. And so our contributions to society are a matter of historical fact. And yet at the same time, we're loathed by most of society. And I really believe that inadvertently, this speech that he made contributed to that. I won't say that it was totally responsible. You can never point to one thing and say that one thing is totally responsible for many different actions and attitudes and people hating people, and things are always more complicated than that. But without a doubt, there are narratives that shape people's thinking. And when Martin Luther King said that he wanted us to be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin, what he basically did was he set a standard so that white people could feel comfortable discriminating against anyone other than someone who looked like him, was educated, had good diction, dressed conservatively, and above all, was exceptional. And the problem with that is that that's not most Black people. Most Black people, like most white people or most any race of people, are average. They're not exceptional. Exceptionalism is just what it says it is. You know, it's a distinction with a difference. Everyone cannot be exceptional. Otherwise, the word exceptional would be totally meaningless. For exceptional to mean anything, there has to be a contrast. And the contrast in this case would be average to below average. And like I said before, at the very least, most people are basically average. And of course, Black people are no exception. So when he told white people to judge us by the content of our character and the color of our skin, which I covered this in another video, the problem with that is that a racist white person sees the color of our skin as being synonymous with our character. So that really doesn't help. And that's the reason why we haven't seen any advancements, really any real true advancements as far as racism in this country, because the racists who have passed their racist ideology down generation after generation, they still see things the same way. They still see things as far as skin color being synonymous with behavior. They literally think that if you're black, that automatically means you're no good. That automatically means you have depraved behavior. You're lazy. You're shiftless. You know, you probably engage in some type of illegal activity. You can't be trusted. That's what they equate our skin color with as far as our character is concerned. So not only was that a problem, but then I want you to look at the audience. Look at the people in the audience, the black people that you can see there, the way they're dressed. They're dressed to look pretty much like Martin Luther King. And the average black person doesn't walk around in a suit. And we used to call that, jokingly, they called that the civil rights suit. Most black people didn't walk around in a suit. Most women didn't walk around in dresses. A lot of the marches that took place back then started in churches. And so a lot of times people were dressed in their church clothes when they went marching. But that wasn't an accident. When Martin Luther King led his marches and he wanted to show up to the media just how racist the white cops were, and these racist areas where they marched, where he knew that they were going to be met with an angry racist crowd. He wanted to present a picture of black people being the type of black people that look non-threatening, that look conservative, so that white people looking at it would say, okay, well, these people, they're not doing anything. They're not doing anything to deserve the fire hoses and the dogs and the beatings and the tear gas. They're not doing anything to deserve all that. Look at them. They're just decent people. They're just like we do when we go to church on Sundays or when we go to our business meetings. So, whereas had they been dressed like just regular people on the street, it would have been so much easier to demonize them and say that, well, these are the type of people I don't want my neighborhood to look at them. They look just like, Joe around the corner that I see in front of the liquor store. I certainly wouldn't want him in my neighborhood. So that was his attempt to change that image, and at the same time present an image that was so wholesome and so clean that no narrative could be used other than to say these people did not deserve to be treated this way. And if all they want is equality, equality of opportunity and equality of treatment, if that's all they're asking for, then they shouldn't be treated that way if we really believe in what America stands for. Now, again, that was effective on the percentage of white people who were objective-minded enough to even think that way, because the racist whites didn't care. That's the reason why they sicked the dogs and the fire hoses and the tear gas and the beatings. That's the reason why they did all that, because they didn't care. They didn't care that they were dressed that way, that they were acting peaceful. They didn't care. That's what I'm saying. To a true racist, those things don't matter. They never did, and they still don't. And so when you add in the exceptionalism part, all that does is make it that much harder for average black people to be able to navigate themselves through this society. And when I was growing up, the older generation used to tell us all the time, you have to be twice as good if you're black. You know, if you're competing against other white people, you have to be twice as good, which was another way of saying exceptionalism. But that's what but that's the way they phrased it. And it really used to make me really upset when I heard it, because I'm like, why do I have to be twice as good? I can understand why I need to be as good, but why would I ever need to be twice as good? That always bothered me. You know, in my estimation, they were buying into the fact that black people weren't as good. And so that meant that in order to prove that they were as good, they had to prove that they were twice as good as a white person to be even on the same level as a white person. I totally rejected that when I heard it. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was ignorant. I thought it was way off base. And so my thing was, I don't need to do that. Why can't I just be average? And I'm going to get to that in a second, but that was where I was with it at the time. And so then the other thing is that athletes and entertainers, I noticed, were always more accepted by the white public, if you want to put it that way, more so than black people in any other profession. Because even while they were beating Martin Luther King and his protesters, they were still buying tickets to go to, basketball games and football games to watch black players on the football field. They were still watching black entertainers dancing and telling jokes. And so I'm like, okay, so there's a disconnect here. And what I didn't understand at the time, because I was too young at that time to know anything about exceptionalism, I didn't understand where that came into play. But hindsight's 2020, I understand now that the reason why those people were so much more accepted than other black people was because they were exceptional. If they were athletes and they were allowed to get into the team, because they had the Negro leagues before they ever had black people getting into the NFL and the NBA. And when they did start letting black people compete in those sports, they were exceptional. They were always exceptional. Same way it was with the entertainers. Sammy Davis Jr., he could do impressions, he could sing, he could tap dance, he could act, he could do comedy. He was even, I think he was even in the Guinness World Book of Records for having been able to do the fastest quick draw with a 6-shooter. And on top of that, he was also a musician. They could play a few different instruments. And so, that's exceptionalism. That's exceptional talent. That's not normal. That's exceptional. And then you look at all the, in the same way with the basketball players and football players. They all put up numbers, and they all did things that made them exceptional. And that's the reason why they were so well loved and so respected in the sports and entertainment field, was because of the exceptionalism. Meanwhile, white people only had to be good. They didn't have to be exceptional. And so that created a narrative in the minds of white people and the white public at large that for black people to have any worth in society, they had to be exceptional. They could not be average, they had to be exceptional. And again, most people in any race are only average. That's the reason why only some people can get the title or the label of being exceptional, because that's the distinction with the difference. And so then black people who were being killed in our society, the unarmed black people that were killed, you know, the Trayvon Martins, the Tamir Rices, the, you know, Freddie Grays, all these people who were killed, most of the time after they were killed, their families would put up pictures of them where, you know, if they had graduated, they'd put up a picture of them in a cap and gown. If they had another picture of them where they were looking real innocent looking, like with Trayvon, they wouldn't put the picture up with him in the hoodie. They would put the picture up with him in just, you know, a casual shirt and with a smile on his face. You know, it was always that way. And of course it was the attempt to humanize him, those people, to the public at large that only looked at them as being animals and worthy of being shot down like dogs in the street. I get that. But at the same time, they were also sending a message that if you look this way, if you're conducting yourself this way, and if your character seems to be that type of character, then you deserve to live. But what about the black people who don't look that way, which so many more of them don't? And that's the reason why I started out with the MLK speech, because it goes back to that same thing. Judge me by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. But that character that you're supposed to be judged by is a character that is basically conservative, could be Christian, or at the very least religious, intelligent, articulate, and above all, non-threatening. And so anybody black that doesn't fall into that category in the eyes of somebody white, or in this case a white cop, because he's the one doing the shooting, then the opposite is true. So now they had to go back posthumously and try to turn this person into someone who was a law-abiding citizen that never deserved to be treated that way or profiled that way, by showing them in a cap and gown, or maybe if it's, you know, or maybe showing the man in a family portrait with his kids. You know, that never has to be done with any other race of people but us, because we have that stigma of either you're exceptional or, pardon my language, you're shit. You're one of the two. You can't, there's no in between. If you're just average, you're a zero. And we've even set that standard even for ourselves in a lot of ways, because we bought into that also. Like I said, when those old people was telling me I had to be twice as good, that wasn't just for white people. That was to their expectations also, that average wasn't good enough. I know a lot of kids when I was going to school that if they brought home less than an A or a B, they got their asses beat. They actually got their asses beat. Now, I didn't have to experience that. Thank God. My parents weren't that bad. I mean, you know, if I brought home a failing grade, if I brought home D's and F's, then yeah, I could get my ass beat for that, and I did. But if I didn't bring home straight A's and B's, no, they weren't going to beat my ass. But I knew a lot of people, that was the standard in their house. They knew they couldn't bring home anything less than a B. It better be A's and B's only on that report card. Well, average is a C. The average grade is a C. not an A or a B. So again, you're talking about exceptionalism. And another problem with that is there was a book, and I'm so bad with names, and I'm sorry I didn't come prepared with the name of the author of the book, but the name of the book is the Miseducation of the Black Man. And in that book, he talks about the fact that in society, and this was back during the time he wrote the book, but in some ways could still be true on some level. He said that in this society, if there is a white version of someone in a certain position, then they don't need a black version of that same position. If they already have somebody white filling that position, or if there's enough white people doing it, they don't need somebody black doing the same thing. And that's what really made me understand what the old folks were saying when they said when you're black you have to be twice as good, because that was another way of them saying that. That was the way they articulated that, but it was the same thing that he was saying. In other words, if you're only going to be average at best at what you do, and they have the ability to, which we know they do, on the job, to pick who's going to be promoted or who's going to get, who's going to get the position if the position becomes open. If they have enough qualified white people for that position, they don't need a black one. And the only way they would is if the black person was exceptional. And if you think about it, we've all seen that on our own jobs. Anybody that you see black, usually, that has made it into positions that normally you would only see white people in, if you get to know anything about them, usually they're exceptional. Now, I know some people will say, well, not necessarily, because, they have a quota system. We had affirmative action. They would fill that position with somebody. They had to fill it with somebody black. And so and that's true to a point. That's true to a point. But there are some positions where what the person does is so important, they could not put someone in there who was incompetent just because they're black. They couldn't. Businesses aren't run that way. They don't put people to head up departments and put people in key positions just because they're black if they're incompetent. Because that can affect the business and that can affect the profit of the business, especially if it's a company that's publicly traded. They definitely can't make those kind of decisions because the board's going to have something to say about it. They're going to wait a minute, what are you doing? Our stock prices are plummeting. What are you doing? We can't do that. This isn't going to work. You got to move this person out of that position. And that's regardless of color, really. So obviously, if they're black, they're not going to be tolerated if they're going to actually pull the company down because of incompetence. So if you take in consideration, they can't put someone who's incompetent in that position. And at the same time, they don't really need someone who's no more competent to do the work than someone white is. Then they're going to pick the one who's exceptional at doing it to justify that they would even be there in the first place. That only stands to reason that they would. And that's what we see in most cases. And going back to the athletes and entertainers, it was the same standard. They didn't just pick black guys that could shoot ball or could run a football. They just didn't pick just anybody for those positions that was black. They had to be exceptional. Jim Brown was exceptional when he first started. Willie Mays, Jackie Robinson, they were exceptional when they first started. The Williams sisters, they were exceptional. I can go down the line. They were exceptional, or they weren't there. That's the reason why they were there. Someone who is just good, if you were black, or just average, you're basically a zero. So that's what set us up for that. And so that's the reason why you have the situations that we have where you have black entertainers who have risen to the top and white people love them. You know, Ye, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Drake. You know, you go down the line, LeBron, Steph Curry. You can go all the way across, all the way across the board. All these people are exceptional at what they do. They're not good, and they're definitely not average. They're exceptional. That's the reason why they're accepted. And at the same time, when they're being loved and they're being pedestalized by white people, because if you ever notice who's in those audiences, a lot of times, even in the rap, especially in rap music, I was going to say even, especially in rap music, a lot of the artists, when they pan the audience, is white people, depending on where they're having the concerts at. And especially if they're overseas. So yeah, they love them, but at the same time, when it comes to an average black person on the street, our lives aren't worth anything. They're worth absolutely nothing. And the reason why they aren't is because we're not exceptional. You're just average. And that should not be a death sentence for black people. It shouldn't be, but it is in many cases. And like I said before, Martin Luther King actually helped facilitate that type of thinking when he made this speech. That one day we would be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin. It was a good gesture. I understand it, but it leaves out so much, and the implications ended up being dangerous for other people who can't be him, because everybody isn't going to be like him and his constituents. Like I said, most people of every race are only average at best.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day